If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Because it's better to remain silent and only be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Yep, in this week's episode of 30 on Thursdays, we're going to relearn all those simple things that we were supposed to already know. Well, hey guys, welcome back to 30 on Thursdays, the online resource of the Root Church of Tampa Bay at University Mall. Pastor David here with you, and in this week's episode, we're going to continue in our brand new series entitled The King's Counsel, in which we take a look at what King Solomon, one of the wisest men who ever lived, had to say about how we live our lives today. Now, this particular video is going to focus exclusively on our words or our speech or our communication with one another in general, okay? This is interesting. Of all the subjects, all the topics that we're going to discuss in this series, this particular topic has more verses dedicated to it than any of the others. Don't believe me? Boom. Check it out. This represents a short list of some of the things that King Solomon had to say about our words or about our speech or about what we say to one another, okay? There are other verses that I didn't include in this list. Now, I'm going to put this list back in front of you at the end of the video, but I just wanted you to see how many verses there are that deal with our speech. Now, we're not going to look at all of them, but I think a fair question is, why in the world did Solomon dedicate so much time to our words or to our speech or to our communication? Well, I think it's because Solomon knew some things that we don't think about all that often. For example, I think Solomon knew that we talk a lot more than we think we talk. I don't know if you know this, but the average person says 7,000 words each and every day. Now, to all of my introverted friends, I got you, okay? Because 7,000 words for a preacher, that's a light morning, okay? But I mean, seriously, 7,000 words, that's a lot of words. How are you spending your 7,000? How are you investing your $7,000? Are your words godly or are they ungodly? Are your words life-giving or are your words life-taking? We talk a lot more than we think we do. Solomon knew something else, though. He knew that words were powerful. You know how this saying goes, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. That's a crock, okay? That's a load. I don't buy it for a second. I mean, it's true, words can't break bones, but words can absolutely break hearts, right? And when it comes to putting something back together, a heart is a whole lot more fragile than a bone is. Solomon knew that our words were powerful. Number 3, I think Solomon knew that there are so many ways that we can sin with our mouths or with our words, and it's so easy to do. Look, I just put together a short list. I'm going to just read it to you real quick, and if you invest 10 seconds of thought into this, you can come up with some that didn't make my list. We can lie to one another with our mouths. We can gossip about each other. We can slander one another with our words. We can betray each other. We can boast. We can break confidence. We can even, of course, blaspheme God. Okay? There's a ton of ways that we can sin with our mouths. And I think every single one of us has said something across our lives that we wish we could take back. And the reason is because it's so easy and quick to sin with our mouths, with our words. And fourthly, I think Solomon knew that our words could be life-giving, but only if we choose them to be. Allow me to read one proverb to you that kind of functions as an umbrella over everything else Solomon wrote about this topic, okay? This is kind of like the theme verse about our speech in the book of Proverbs. It's Proverbs 18:21, and this is what the king says. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. I dare you to think that this is an exaggeration. I dare you to think that this line is an overstatement. Life and death is in the power of our words. If you don't believe it, let me just take you to one example that those of us in America are super familiar with. The CDC reports that 20% of high school students reported being bullied on school property just last year. Now, bullying can result in a whole bunch of things. For example, physical injury, social distress or emotional distress, self-harm, death, increased risk of depression, increased risk of anxiety, difficulty sleeping. and lower academic performance. So no, I don't think that this is an overstatement or an exaggeration one bit. So let's take a few minutes to kind of walk through a few of these proverbs to see just how practical and how important the Word of God is to how we speak to one another. Let's start right here in Proverbs chapter 10, verse 11. Solomon writes, "The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence." What Solomon is essentially saying is you can always tell the difference between a righteous person and a wicked person by how they speak. You probably know what a righteous person sounds like, right? I mean, they're always talking words of forgiveness to those that have wounded them. They're always showering encouragement on others. They're always speaking the truth, like even if it is, uncomfortable or hurts a little bit. They might be teaching or preaching the Word of God accurately, okay, if that's their calling or profession, because that's what a righteous person does. He speaks truth. She shares truth. A wicked person, on the other hand, they conceal violence, is what Solomon says. In other words, he says that they contain violence. Their words contains violence. The bottom line is this. Solomon's saying that your words are always going to reveal your motives. Your words are going to reveal your heart. Even Jesus agrees with this. 950 years after Solomon wrote this down, Jesus was having a conversation one day with a crowd of people and his disciples, and up stroll the religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees, the scribes, the priests, and they begin to kind of pick a fight with Jesus. And Jesus, in typical Jesus fashion, is able to use his words and just shut it down, right? And later the disciples come to Jesus and they're like, "Yo, Jesus, I don't know if you know this, but you offended the Pharisees." And I love what Jesus says and how he kind of dismisses it. Like my translation, he goes, "So what?" Because what Jesus is talking about is super important. He's talking about where words come from and what words do to us. Listen to what he says in Matthew 15, verses 18 and 19. "What comes out of your mouth proceeds from the heart, and this is what defiles a person." In other words, the words don't come out of your mouth, they come out of your heart. And they, if they're unclean, can make you unclean. Because out of the heart, this is verse 19, out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, and slander. So Solomon is saying the same thing Jesus is saying. Be very careful what you say, because your words will reveal your heart. Let's keep going. Proverbs chapter 10, verses 19, 20, and 21. A little lengthy one, but it's super short to understand and explain. "When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is of little worth. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for a lack of sense." Solomon is simply saying here that if there's a greater number of words, there's a greater chance of sin. So let's just keep it simple. Don't talk too much. That's the point of these three verses here in Proverbs chapter 10. That's pretty simple. Speaking of simple, let's go to another one that's very easy to understand. Proverbs 13, verse 3. "Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He who opens wide his lips comes to ruin." Okay, forgive me, but I look at this verse and I call it the mafia verse, right? Because Solomon says, whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. Whoever watches his words saves his life. Like I get a mental picture of some guy named Tony saying, "You better watch your mouth if you know what's good for you." You know what I'm saying? Like this is the image that I get here. Okay, and again, it just echoes the theme from the Proverbs chapter 10, verses 19, 20, and 21 that we just looked at. Don't talk too much. In fact, this is really interesting. There's an Arab proverb. That's right, an Arab proverb, not a Christian proverb, not a Solomon proverb. An Arab proverb back in this day that said this, quote, "Take heed that your tongue does not cut your throat." Like, whoa, I mean, like that may not be Solomon, but it's still pretty good, okay? Here's the deal. If we guard our mouth, if we guard our words, if we take care of what we say, then here's what we do. We preserve our lives and the lives of those around us. We don't talk too much and ruin reputations. We don't talk too much and say something we shouldn't say. We don't talk too much and maybe reveal a secret, okay? Again, this is super practical. Let's go into another really practical proverb. Proverbs 15, verse 1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Okay, let's play out a hypothetical situation just for a moment. Okay, here, go with me. Let's say that somebody's really mad with you. I mean, they are angry, they are upset with you, and they come at you. I mean, they call you every name in the book, every harsh thing that they can say, they just spit it and spew it in your face, okay? Here's my question. You understand that how you respond matters, right? I mean, you get that, right? Like somebody comes at you harsh, if you respond harsh, it's kind of like pouring gas on a flame. But Solomon says if you greet their harsh words with a soft word, it soothes and it heals. Okay, so I was just going to say like that. I always say it this way: in any argument, somebody's got to be the adult. Okay, in fact, David, Solomon's own father, modeled this proverb of his son probably before Solomon was ever even born. In fact, I know before Solomon was ever born, because David wasn't even king yet. If you go back to 1 Samuel chapter 25, you have this guy Nabal. He's a knucklehead, and he kind of like calls David out. He says some mean, disparaging things about David, and David could have responded in like manner. He could have like dressed Nabal down, right? But he didn't. He responded graciously. He responded mercifully. He responded tactfully. Okay, and he really disarmed the situation. Lots of times this happened to David. Okay, in fact, this wasn't even the worst time. And David almost always met people's harsh words with grace and mercy. We would do well to do the same thing. Okay, let's keep going. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 9. Whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends. Now, when Solomon says, that whoever covers up an offense, he's not talking about a conspiracy like, sweeping things under the rug, pretending it didn't happen. No, what he's saying is this person is a good person because they just let the past be the past. They bury the hatchet, they forgive it, and they just move on. But the second person that he talks about, the second person that he writes about says, no, he's always reminding people of what so-and-so said. He's always regurgitating, gossip, or he's always bringing up the failures or the mistakes of others. And here's what happens. Solomon says that person separates close friends. So let me just ask you the burning question. Like, is this indicative of your speech? Like, take a look at how you talk to others at your business or at your office or at school or wherever it is you may be. Do you always bring up others' failures? How about at home, like your spouse perhaps, or your siblings or your children? Are you always reminding them of your failures? If you are, like I just want to say this to you out of love, your willingness to do that says a lot more about your heart than theirs. So be very, very careful. In fact, I would say just quit doing that. Live like that first person. Bury the offense, cover it up, conceal it, do away with it. Move on. Okay, speaking of moving on, let's move on to Proverbs chapter 18, verse 2. King Solomon says this: a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. Solomon says a foolish person doesn't want to get understanding. He just wants to give his opinion, okay? Like, it's my right. I can say whatever I want to say. And like, technically speaking, that person is correct. They can say whatever they want to say. Speech is free. But speech has never been free of consequences. Look, guys, there's nothing wrong with having an opinion. In fact, I'll even go so far as to say there's nothing wrong with sharing your opinion in context. I think that when we share our opinion, it has to be from a platform of wisdom, okay? It has to be the truth, it has to be selfless, and it has to be for the benefit of others. And if so, then we share that because we're sharing understanding and wisdom. Okay, let's just keep going here. Proverbs chapter 18, verses 6 and 7. King Solomon says, a fool's lips walk into a fight, and his mouth invites a beating. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are a snare to his soul. Okay, for time's sake, I almost cut this one because it's just so darn funny to me, right? Now, look, I can't prove this, but I think that King Solomon was a fan of the 1986 blockbuster Top Gun, okay? Remember that scene where Commander Stinger is like dressing down, Maverick, aka Tom Cruise, and he says, son, your ego is writing checks your body can't cash. We have a saying where I come from. It goes like this: don't let your mockingbird mouth overload your hummingbird butt. That's hashtag facts from the farm. Okay, you're welcome. In other words, don't let your words pick a fight for you. Don't say something that's going to get you in trouble. Don't say something that pushes somebody else's buttons, because you'll get into trouble. Speaking of getting into trouble, I've been in trouble with this next proverb, and I wish it weren't the case, but it is. So let me read you the proverb, and I'll tell you a story. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 19. Whoever goes about slandering, oh, what a nasty word. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate with a simple babbler. Okay, highly practical, right? Be careful who you're friends with. If you're friends with a babbler, they're going to gossip about you. They're going to slander you and others, right? Gossipers gossip. That's just what they do, okay? And people might say, it's not gossip if it's true. Of course it's gossip, okay? It doesn't have to be false to be gossip. It can absolutely be the truth. It's still gossip. You're still talking about somebody in a hurtful way outside of their presence. I know that because I was guilty of that once. Way back when I was a youth pastor, and I had a lot more brown hair than gray hair, I had this silly little practice. Like every time a teenager had a birthday, I would call them up and leave like the stupidest, the dumbest, most ridiculous version of happy birthday on their answering machine. For millennials, an answering machine is, just look it up, okay? And so those of you, I would sing happy birthday in this ridiculous voice, right? And those of you who know me well, know me personally, know that singing is not my spiritual gift. So I want to really emphasize the ridiculous nature of this song. So one night, Jennifer and I were over at her mom's house for dinner. And we're talking, chit-chatting, and I said, excuse me, and I grabbed the phone because I needed to go make a phone call to one of the girls in our youth ministry. And so I dialed the number, sang this ridiculous, stupid, over-the-top version of Happy Birthday, and then, said, hope you have a great night, enjoy dinner with the family, because I know that they were out having dinner. And then I put the phone down. I put the phone on the receiver. And somebody in the room says, oh, is that the girl who... I said, no, this is the individual who's doing this. She said this at one time, and she's kind of been making some bad decisions of late, and she's embroiled in this relationship that's really not so good. And in fact, it was all the truth. Like everything I was saying was the truth. And as I was talking about this person, the phone went bing, and I looked at it, and I grabbed it, and I realized that I didn't hang the phone up properly. And everything that I had been saying about this girl had been recorded on her answering machine on her birthday. Not my finest hour. Like, I knew in that evening that gossip was wrong, but I gave into it anyway. And worse, I got busted like in a memorable, like you could hit repeat and repeat and repeat on my sin. And I hate that. Okay, because I knew better, I just didn't do better. Let's keep moving. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 20. For lack of wood, the fire goes out, and where there is no whisperer, quarreling ceases. Pop quiz. You know what happens to a fire when it runs out of wood? Yeah, it burns out. It's extinguished. It ceases to exist. Question number 2. What happens to an argument when somebody says, I'm not going to argue anymore? Yeah, the argument dies out. I always say it takes 2 to tango, it takes 2 to argue. So are you willing to put your pride and put your opinion in check to say, hey, let's restore peace? Because for the lack of wood, a fire burns out. The same thing happens to our arguments and to our quarrels when we are unwilling to quarrel with others. Our last one, Proverbs chapter 29, verse 11. A fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. You ever heard somebody say, man, so I said this to this knucklehead, and I said that, and I dressed him down, and I looked him right in the eye, and I said to his face, da-da-da-da, and he just, rips this guy apart, right? And you might be thinking, yeah, well, somebody need to tell that guy that, and maybe you even agree and are happy that the person said that to this individual. But here's the truth. God's word calls that person a fool. He says a fool gives full vent to his spirit. Meanwhile, wisdom demands restraint. Wisdom might say, yeah, I want to say that. Yeah, I want to tear that person. Yeah, I want to shred that fool, but I don't want to be a fool myself. So I'm going to restrain my words and model wisdom. So, kind of reached that point here in the video where we need to talk about the outcomes of what happens if we live by these proverbs and what happens to us if we don't live by these proverbs. Just a few things here really quickly. Number one, if you speak with wisdom, your life and the lives of those around you will be blessed. Now, I want to go on record and say something here, just so that you're all on the same page. We're not talking about just the words that come out of our mouth, right? We're talking about things that we type. We're talking about things that we text. We're talking about comments that we post online, all of our communication. And if you think that Solomon's proverbs about our speech don't apply to Twitter just because Twitter didn't exist 3,000 years ago, I love you, but you're the fool, okay? Because clearly Solomon is talking about all forms of our communication with one another. So if we speak with wisdom, your life and the lives of those around you will be blessed. Unfortunately, the exact opposite is also true. If you don't speak with wisdom, your life and the lives of those around you will not be blessed. Number two, your words can bring life or they can cause death. Okay, we already looked at Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. But I want to just kind of share this thing. I didn't know this, but in doing the research, I found a writing in the Midrash. The Midrash is basically like the Jewish rabbis' like commentary on the Old Testament. Like they would write notes in about like this is what Genesis chapter 26, verse 2 means, or this is what Psalm 1, verse 9 means. Like, okay, they would write their comments in the margins and everything, and that's called the Midrash. Okay, the Midrash for Proverbs 18, verse 21. You know, the power of life and death hangs in the balance of the tongue, right? This is what the Midrash says. The evil tongue slays three: the slanderer, the slandered, and the listener. So be very careful. Your words can bring life or they can cause death. Number three, spoken words are like squirted toothpaste. Now we're getting theological, right? Okay, let me break this down. You ever been like brushing your teeth and go to squeeze some toothpaste out of the tube, right? And you just kind of get this Armageddon amount of toothpaste. It goes all over the toothbrush. It goes all over your hand, maybe the sink, perhaps even your shirt, right? Okay, no amount of pushing, no amount of hoping, no amount of effort whatsoever is going to get that toothpaste back in the tube, right? The same thing is true of our words. Once they leave the gate of our lips, there's no putting them back in. The sad reality is that our loved ones cannot unhear what we've said out of anger, out of malice, out of envy, out of jealousy, okay? And those words are going to sting and wound their soul for a long, long time. In fact, maybe they'll never forget what you said to them. So be very careful, because spoken words are like squirted toothpaste. Fourthly and lastly, you will be known by your words. Okay, so good or bad, you're going to be known by your words. I didn't make the rules. I'm just making you aware of the rules, right? You know people in your life that you enjoy being around because their words are good, their words are kind, their words are true. And then there are people in your life that you try to avoid because their words are none of the above. You judge your friends by what they say. Is it not fair that they judge you by how you speak? Be very careful, because you will be known by your words. Okay, I want to leave you as we wrap up here with just a few extra pieces of reading and research that you can kind of carry on by yourself to learn even more about wisdom. So I told you I was going to show you this list here again, right? All those passages from Proverbs that you see in the highlighted yellow are the ones we just talked about. The verses that are white, we didn't get time to go over. So if you want to like hit pause, snap a picture of this, and kind of look up these verses, at least a few of them, kind of round out your experience and your knowledge of the wisdom that Solomon shares on speech, okay? Number two, why don't you take a look at who tells a lie in Genesis chapter 12, okay? Then, after you read Genesis chapter 12, flip over to Genesis chapter 20 and see who tells a little fib there. I'll give you a hint. It's the same person. And then flip over to Genesis chapter 26, verses 1 through 17, and see who tells a tale there. I'll give you a hint. Like father, like son. Number three, and lastly, James chapter 3 is one of the best chapters in the entire Bible on the tongue, okay? He uses some graphic imagery. He paints some really candid pictures about the power of the tongue, how we should use it, and how we shouldn't use it. So take 2.5, 3 minutes, read James chapter 3 in its entirety, and learn some lessons about the power of the tongue, okay? Well, there you have it, guys. That's probably enough words about words, okay? Next week, we're going to talk about something that's just as important. We're going to talk about work, but in the meantime, okay, if you have a question about words or speech or communication, put your question in the comment section below. Man, I keep a close eye on those, and it would be my honor to be able to weigh in and try to answer your questions and just push you closer to a great understanding and relationship with Jesus, okay? If your question is or comment, your feedback is a little more personal, you can reach us directly by going to our website. It's www.theroot.church. You can click on the contact button in the upper right-hand portion of the screen and send a message straight to me, and I'll get back with you and provide any help that I can. Of course, if you want to just join with us like live in worship, we meet for worship on Saturday nights at 5 p.m. You can kind of come be with us face to face. And we start at 5 o'clock in University Mall, right there next to the food court. We have this awesome theater space, and we always end our services with food and drink and fellowship, so it's a lot of fun. So come meet some new friends and worship the Lord with us. It'll be a great time. Listen, guys, I hope that this has been a blessing. I hope it's been practical, okay? And there's a lot more to talk about from the Book of Proverbs. We're going to tackle another practical topic next week, so join us next Thursday for our very next episode of 30 on Thursdays.